I left town for 6 days, just 6. And when I came back, the road to my own house was gone. Not blocked, not under construction, not temporarily inaccessible, gone. Like it had never existed. And standing where my driveway used to be was a wall of packed dirt and a chain-link fence with a sign that basically said I didn't belong there anymore. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who panics easily. I've lived out on my land for almost 12 years, and when you live that far out, things break, roads wash out, trees fall, you deal with it. But this wasn't weather or bad luck. This was deliberate. Someone had decided that my way home wasn't mine anymore. My name's Daniel Harper. I own about 8.5 acres just outside a small town most people have never heard of, somewhere between rolling hills and pine forest, the kind of place where GPS gives up halfway in and you learn to trust landmarks instead. My place sits at the very end of a gravel road that stretches a little under half a mile from the county highway, and that road's been there longer than I've been alive. Built sometime in the early 60s, back when the land was divided up for ranching. It's not fancy, never was, but it's legal, recorded, and more importantly, it's the only way in or out unless you plan on hiking through dense woods and a creek that floods every spring. For over a decade, that road was just part of life. Delivery trucks used it, my friends used it. Even the occasional lost tourist would wander down it before realizing they'd made a wrong turn. Nobody questioned it. Until last year. That's when a company called Silverline Ridge Development bought up the parcel of land between my property and the highway. It was a big purchase, couple dozen acres at least, and within weeks, survey stakes started popping up like mushrooms after rain. Then came the heavy equipment, the trailers, the crews. It didn't take long to figure out what they were planning. High-end homes. Big ones. The kind with long driveways, stone facades, and real estate listings that talk about exclusive living and panoramic views. At first, I didn't think much of it. I've seen development creep closer over the years. It's how these things go. You start with open land, then a few houses, then a few more. Eventually somebody with deep pockets decides to turn it into something premium. Still, I figured they'd work around what was already there. That's usually how it works. Usually. The first time I met the guy in charge, his name was Victor Lang, mid-40s, sharp haircut, always wearing sunglasses even when the sun wasn't that bright. He was standing near the road with a surveyor, looking down at a tablet like it held the future. I pulled up in my truck, rolled down the window, and asked if they needed anything. He gave me one of those polite corporate smiles, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and asked, "You live down this road?" I said, "Yeah." End of it. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away somewhere. Then he asked, "How often do you use it?" Now that question, it stuck with me. Not because it was complicated, but because it was strange. I mean, how often do I use the only road to my house? Every day? Sometimes multiple times a day. So I told him exactly that. It's my access point. Only one I've got. He glanced at the surveyor, then back at me, and gave a small shrug. We're evaluating some changes to improve traffic flow for the development. I remember leaning my arm on the window frame, looking past him at the stakes they'd planted, and something in my gut tightened. Not fear. Not yet. Just a sense that this conversation wasn't as casual as he wanted it to seem. I said, "That road's got a recorded easement. Been there since the 60s. His smile didn't change, but it got thinner. We're aware of existing conditions. That was it. No argument. No pushback. Just that vague, careful language people use when they don't want to say what they're actually thinking. We didn't talk long after that. I drove on, went about my day, and tried to shake it off. But over the next few weeks, I noticed things. The survey markers started shifting. Equipment got closer to the road. At one point, I saw a crew measuring along the exact line of the gravel path, not near it on it. Still, no one said anything directly to me. No notices, no letters, nothing official. And life went on. Then my sister called from out of state. She'd just had surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that she needed help for a few days. So I packed a bag, locked up the house, and left. 6 days. That's all it was supposed to be. 6 days where, apparently, someone decided to redraw the map. The drive back was normal. Long, a little tiring. I remember thinking about grabbing groceries once I got home, maybe grilling something simple, settling back into routine. Nothing unusual. Until I turned off the highway. At first, I thought I'd taken the wrong turn. which sounds ridiculous now, but when something familiar changes that drastically, your brain looks for the simplest explanation. But no, the old mailbox cluster was still there, the same bent signpost, the same line of trees. And then I saw it, a massive dirt berm, easily 8 feet high, maybe more, stretching across where the gravel road used to start, packed tight, like it had been compressed by heavy machinery. On top of it ran a chain-link fence, brand new, with metal posts driven deep into the ground. And hanging from that fence, white signs with bold red letters. Private property. No trespassing. I slowed the truck to a crawl, then stopped completely, just sitting there with my hands on the wheel, staring. Because on the other side of that berm, I could see what used to be my road. Except it wasn't a road anymore. It had been torn up, flattened, reshaped. And off to the right, curving away like it had a mind of its own, was a smooth, freshly paved street leading toward a gated entrance I'd never seen before. They hadn't just blocked my driveway. They'd erased it. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. I sat there for a minute, maybe longer, just trying to make sense of what I was looking at, because your brain doesn't immediately jump to someone illegally erased my access road and built over it. It looks for something smaller, something temporary, a detour, construction, a misunderstanding. But the longer I stared at that dirt wall and those signs, the more it sank in. This wasn't temporary. This was finished work, planned, executed, signed off, and very intentionally done while I was gone. I stepped out of the truck, gravel crunching under my boots, and walked closer to the berm, running my hand over the packed dirt like that might somehow prove it wasn't real. It was solid, machine compacted, not something you throw together overnight unless you have serious equipment and a clear reason to do it. And that fence, it was brand new, still had that metallic sheen, no dust, no wear, like it had been installed hours ago. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. "Sir, you can't be here." I turned around and saw a guy in a neon safety vest walking toward me from the paved roadside, radio clipped to his shoulder, clipboard in hand, not aggressive, but not friendly either, just doing his job. I said, "I live back there," and pointed past the berm, toward where my house sat somewhere beyond the trees. He shook his head almost immediately, like he'd already had this conversation in his head before I even spoke. "There's no access through here anymore. This is private property now." I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. "Yeah, it's always been private property. Mine's at the end of that road." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but still firm. "I've been told to direct anyone away from this entrance. There's an alternate access route on the east side." Alternate. That word hit me wrong. "I don't have an alternate," I said, a little sharper now. "I have one road. This one." He hesitated, then said, "You'll need to contact the site manager." Oh, I was already planning on that. I got back in the truck, pulled out my phone, and scrolled until I found Victor's number, the one he'd given me like it was some kind of courtesy. It rang twice before he picked up. "Daniel," he said, casual as ever, like we were neighbors checking in about the weather. "Everything all right?" I stared at the berm while I spoke, trying to keep my voice steady. "You blocked my road." There was a pause, not long, but long enough to tell me he wasn't surprised. "Yeah," he said finally, like he was confirming a meeting time. "We rerouted that access. It was cutting directly through our main boulevard layout." I clenched my jaw. "That access is my legal easement." Another pause, then a soft exhale, like I was being difficult. "We've provided a new entry point on the east side of the property. It's actually a better grade, safer for vehicles." I didn't ask for better. I cut in. I asked for my road. His tone shifted just slightly, still polite, but now with an edge of impatience. "Daniel, the new route improves your access and aligns with the overall development plan. It's an upgrade." An upgrade. I remember looking at that fence again, those signs telling me to keep out of a place I'd driven through for over a decade, and something inside me just went quiet. Not calm, not exactly, just focused. "I don't want your upgrade," I said. "I want what's legally mine." He sighed. Actually sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "Look, we can go back and forth on this, but the work's already been completed. The new access is there for you. You should take a look at it." That was the moment, the exact moment, where the conversation stopped being a negotiation and turned into something else. Because it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like the decision had already been made, like my input was optional, like the law was something flexible if you had enough money and machinery behind you. I didn't argue anymore, didn't raise my voice, didn't threaten anything. I just said, "All right," and hung up. And that probably confused him more than if I'd yelled. I sat in the truck for a few seconds, then reached over to the glove compartment and pulled out a small folder I kept there, copies of property documents, surveys, things you don't usually need until you really do. Then I got out again and started taking photos. Everything. The berm, the fence, the signs, the paved road that curved off in the wrong direction like it was deliberately avoiding my property. I walked along the edge, documenting angles, distances, anything that might matter later. If they were going to pretend this was legitimate, I was going to make sure there was no room for interpretation. By the time I finished, the sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across what used to be my access point, and I realized something else. I still couldn't get home. Now, I could have tried finding this alternate route, could have driven around, maybe asked someone where it was, followed whatever detour they decided was good enough for me. But something in me resisted that. Not out of stubbornness. Well, maybe a little, but mostly because I knew that the second I accepted that new route, even temporarily, it would become the new normal. And I wasn't ready to give them that. So I drove into town instead. There's a small law office just off Main Street. Nothing fancy, brick building, a little sign out front that most people probably drive past without noticing. That's where Rebecca Collins works. She'd handled a boundary issue for a neighbor of mine years back, and I remembered thinking at the time, if I ever needed a lawyer, she'd be the one. I walked in without an appointment, still dusty, still carrying that folder, and the receptionist gave me that look like, "You've had a day, haven't you? Is Rebecca in?" I asked. A few minutes later, I was sitting across from her desk, explaining what had just happened, and the more I talked, the less it sounded like something that should even be possible. She didn't interrupt much, just listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking for a detail. And when I finally slid the easement document across her desk, she picked it up, read maybe half a page, and her expression changed. Not surprised, not confused, cold. She set the paper down slowly and looked at me. "They did this while you were out of town." 6 days, I said. She leaned back slightly, fingers tapping once against the desk, like she was already 3 steps ahead in her head. "And they didn't contact you? No formal notice, no request to modify the easement?" "Nothing." Another nod, slower this time. "That's not just a property dispute," she said. "That's interference with a recorded easement. Potentially obstruction." The word hung there for a second. Obstruction. Not inconvenience. Not disagreement. Obstruction. "So what does that mean?" I asked. She gave a small, tight smile, the kind you don't see unless someone's about to regret a decision they've already made. "It means they moved fast," she said. "But not fast enough. What happened next moved quicker than I expected." She made a few calls right there in front of me. One to the county clerk's office, another to someone she clearly knew at the courthouse, confirming records, verifying filings, building something piece by piece while I sat there trying to catch up. Then she turned back to me and said, "We're filing an emergency motion. Tonight. Right now." There was no hesitation in her voice, no uncertainty, just a clear, direct plan. And for the first time since I'd seen that dirt wall, I felt something shift. Not relief, not yet, but momentum. Because if Victor thought this was already settled, if he thought I'd just accept whatever upgrade he decided was good enough for me, he was about to find out exactly how wrong he was. By the next morning, I hadn't slept much. Not really. Just lay there replaying that dirt wall over and over in my head. The way it cut across the road like a line someone had drawn and decided I didn't get to cross anymore. And every time I thought about Victor's voice on the phone, calm, dismissive, like this was already done, it lit something in me that wasn't going away. Rebecca called me just after sunrise. "We're on the docket," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Be at the courthouse in an hour." Everything after that moved fast, faster than anything I'd been part of before. Small-town courthouse, nothing dramatic on the outside, but inside, it felt like everything was about to tip one way or the other. Victor was already there when I walked in. Same sunglasses, even indoors, same press shirt, same posture like he owned whatever room he stepped into. He glanced at me once, gave a slight nod. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledging that I existed. Like I was a detail, not a problem. His attorney stood beside him, flipping through a folder, confident, practiced. You could tell they didn't expect this to be complicated. Rebecca leaned toward me and said quietly, "Let them talk first." So we did. When the hearing started, their side laid it out smooth. Almost impressive, if you didn't know better. They talked about development efficiency, improved infrastructure, enhanced access for all parties involved. And then came the part that made me clench my hands just a little tighter. They said they had provided me with a better route. Safer, more modern, more aligned with the future of the area. They made it sound like they'd done me a favor. I remember glancing at Rebecca then, just briefly, and she didn't react. Didn't roll her eyes, didn't interrupt, just waited. Then it was her turn. She didn't raise her voice, didn't try to match their energy. She just walked the judge through the facts, one step at a time. The recorded easement, the original survey, the uninterrupted use for decades. And then the photos. Those photos hit harder than anything anyone said. Because there it was, plain as day. A legal access route, replaced with a wall. No ambiguity, no gray area, just a before and an after that didn't make sense unless someone had decided the rules didn't apply to them. The judge looked at everything, took his time, and then leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the bench. And he asked one question. Was the easement extinguished through legal process? That was it. No speeches, no lectures, just that. Victor's attorney hesitated, just for a second, but in that room, a second feels a lot longer. He adjusted his stance, glanced at Victor, then said, "No, Your Honor, but..." The judge didn't let him finish. "Then it still exists." Simple as that. And just like that, everything shifted. The ruling came down fast, almost as fast as Rebecca had predicted. Silverline Ridge was ordered to restore my original access. Not eventually, not when convenient, within 72 hours. They were also ordered to cover my legal fees, plus damages for loss of access. I remember exhaling for what felt like the first time in a day, but Rebecca didn't look satisfied. Not yet, because as we walked out of that courtroom, she said something that stuck with me. This doesn't end here. And she was right. Because when you tear up something that's been legally recorded for over half a century, people start asking questions. Not just about that road, but about everything else you've been doing. Within days, the county got involved. Inspectors showed up on site. Not just one or two, a full team. Measuring, checking permits, reviewing plans against what had actually been built. And it didn't take long before the cracks started to show. Turns out, moving my road wasn't the only corner they'd cut. They'd graded land beyond approved boundaries, shifted drainage in ways that didn't match their filings, built structures too close to protected setbacks. Things that might have slipped by if nobody had looked too closely. But now, everyone was looking. I drove past the site a few days later, same place where that berm had been, and the whole atmosphere had changed. Where there'd been motion and noise before, now there were trucks sitting idle. Equipment parked. Workers standing around instead of working. And then I saw the signs. Bright red. Hard to miss. Stop work order. Not just one, several, posted across different parts of the site like warnings no one could ignore. 15 lots, all frozen. The berm? Gone. Torn down as fast as it had gone up. The fence pulled out, the posts stacked to the side like evidence of a bad decision. And slowly, piece by piece, they started rebuilding my road. Not the new one they wanted. The old one. Exactly where it had been. Gravel, grade, alignment. All of it restored under county supervision, every inch inspected like they didn't trust a single move anymore. I stood there one afternoon watching it happen, leaning against my truck, arms crossed. And for a moment, Victor walked out from one of the trailers. No sunglasses this time. He looked different, not defeated exactly, but smaller. Like the weight of everything that had come down on him had finally caught up. He walked over, stopped a few feet away, and said, "This didn't have to go this way." I let that sit for a second, then shrugged slightly. "You're right." He frowned, like he wasn't expecting agreement. Then I added, "You could have just left the road alone." That landed. He looked past me, toward the reconstruction, the cost, the delay, the attention, all of it adding up in ways you can't hide from investors. "They wanted a clean layout," he said quietly. "Straight lines. Central access. And I wanted to get home," I replied. No anger in it. Just fact. We stood there for another second. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked back toward the trailers. That was the last time I spoke to him. The project never really recovered after that. Investors got nervous, timelines slipped, costs climbed, and once word got out about the legal issues, the violations, the shutdown, it didn't matter how nice the brochures looked anymore. People pulled out, quietly at first, then all at once. Within a few months, the whole development stalled. Half-finished roads, empty lots, equipment hauled away. What was supposed to be a high-end neighborhood turned into just another patch of land that someone overreached on. As for me, my road's still there. Same gravel, same stretch of trees, same slight curve near the end where the ground dips just a bit before opening up to my place. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Always was. And every time I drive down it now, I notice things I didn't before. The sound of the tires, the way the light hits the dust in the evening, little details that remind me how easy it is for something familiar to disappear if someone decides it's inconvenient. So yeah, that's the story. A company thought they could redraw a line, move something out of their way, and nobody would push back. They were wrong. But here's the part one keep thinking about, and I'm curious what you think. If you were in that position, if someone offered you a better road, smoother, newer, more convenient, but it meant giving up the one that was legally yours, would you have fought it the same way? Or would you have taken the deal and moved on? Let me know, because depending on how you look at it, this could have been avoided, or it could have gone a lot worse. And yeah, if you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Was this justice, or just stubbornness winning out this time?